2. So as chairman of the Public Safety Committee, I am going to call this meeting to order because we have a lot to get through and not a lot of time to do it. So with that, I understand that the first item on the agenda is the complaint form. And I imagine I'll turn it over to you, Chief, and then we'll kind of go through some trustee thoughts. I was hopeful to get some public comment too. Again, it's always a delicate balance trying to work through the number of items that we have and make sure you're moving efficiently, but also making sure that the public who's been nice enough to join us on the call, we have a lot of interest here, gets a chance to speak. So with that, I will stop talking and I will turn it over to you, Chief.
All right, thank you. So in your packet, you have several pieces of information. One to include our current personnel complaint policy. I think that's a good starting point to kind of go through and maybe talk about what's currently in the policy. Certainly, if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask those, or if you want to proceed in a different way, we can also do that as well. And so I think a couple of things that maybe we could get through tonight, and again, on the timing is going to be indicative of what we can get done, but we have the policy, and then attached to the policy is our current complaint form, our current brochure that we hand out, along with 2 other forms that we use internally. I think just overall, generally speaking, I think what we should talk about as well is the complaint brochure that I put together. We put that together 6 years ago. We didn't have that form, and that was a product that we put together. And certainly there's some conflicting language per se on the brochure and in the policy that we just need to shore up because the policy changed and the brochure kind of got fallen behind. So on some of those things, as far as language and things that we want to change, certainly open to any of that as we move forward. So if you have something that you want to particularly discuss, let me know, and we can do that. So if we could go to the personnel complaint policy that's in your packet. If we could just go through that real quick. So on the first page, we talk about what complaints we take. And under that, we will take any allegation of misconduct or improper job performance that, if true, would constitute a violation of department policy or a federal, state, or local policy or rule. Personnel complaints may be generated internally or by the public. And that's kind of just the general overall statement on the complaints that we take currently.
A question, Chief. So internally or by the public, that would include staff, right? Village staff, let's say something came to Tyler or Rebecca.
Correct. And if you look on page, I think that on page 2, the source of complaints, I think that answers your question. I think that is a topic I want to hit on, because I know that's been a topic that's been discussed. And I think our current policy, I think, does a pretty good job of capturing that. But if you look at that, we'll take complaints from individuals, or individuals from the public may make complaints in any form, including in writing, by email, in person, or by telephone. So
okay, I have an issue here because of social media. I mean, I just think you shouldn't say any form. I just wonder if we'd be better off saying, like, you're not going to take one from, you know what I'm saying, on the the police department has a Facebook page, right?
Yep.
I guess I would just, do we want to, I guess I would take a step back. Would we take, if somebody posts a complaint on the Facebook page, would you take it as a complaint?
I guess in general we would. I think that it would be to some extent could be discussed as an anonymous complaint. So I mean, obviously what it says in there or whatnot, how we can follow up would be a potential issue. But I guess we would, I guess.
All right, then would that fall into, I guess I'm trying to eliminate ambiguity so that we all know what to expect and that the parameters are clear. So let's say someone's monitoring the Shorewood Police Department Facebook page, and you someone reads something that could be construed as a complaint. And so then what do they do? Then do they start with the informal a matter in which the shift commander is, or, complaint classifications? Then do you go to complaint form A, B, or C? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I put this out there for discussion.
Yep. I think that's something that we can certainly discuss further and kind of better clarify that. So
Also, you've got like Instagram, Twitter, right? So
correct.
I just think we need to make sure we've had the full discourse on all of this.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's important. And by the way, Chuck, I see you with your hand up. I'm gonna let the chief get through his presentation before.
I just wanted to know which page of the packet it actually is.
20, right now we are on page 25 or so. 24, 25, 26.
Thank you.
Okay, chief, why don't you?
Sure. And then the second one on there, source of complaints, is any department member becoming aware of alleged misconduct shall immediately notify a supervisor. C is supervisors shall initiate a complaint based upon observed misconduct or receipt from any source alleging misconduct that, if true, could result in disciplinary action. And then the fourth one there, and I think this is something that's been talked about, and we do this now, is anonymous and third-party complaints should be accepted and investigated to the extent that sufficient information is provided. And then the last one is a tort claims and lawsuits may generate a personnel complaint. So that's our current source of complaints. And I understand Trustee Stokerbrand's statement there, so we can certainly circle back on that if we need to, or discuss that further. The next item is the complaint form itself, and that's a particular item that we can address, I think, at the end in more detail, because that's been a point where people have had some input. We've gotten some feedback from the community. I've met with a couple of different groups, and I think, the complaint form is something that definitely can be looked at and modified to everyone's liking without major concern. So if you don't mind, you can go to the current complaint form if you wish, but we can address that more towards the end if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Okay. And then the next subheading is acceptance of complaints. And it currently states all complaints will be courteously accepted by any department member and promptly given to the appropriate supervisor. And then there's some language there. Now, there's been some discussion on who should be the one that accept complaints, where should those complaints go, and those types of things. Another topic that I think we can address at the end as well, because I think we have to, in my view, and again, Trustee Warren, if you have a different idea, please let me know, but I think we need to tackle these kind of in a step-by-step so that we don't, just so we can keep it organized. But that's, again, if you want to shift off that, we can do that.
No, let's try to keep, I want to keep it organized. I want to keep it moving because there's a lot of there's a lot of feedback here to provide. So I want to make sure that we're efficient with time here.
Sure. And then the next area I do want to address on page 3 of the policy, there was some to talk about, there was some talk about the language on the form. And again, we'll talk about the form in more detail, but the state statute 66.0511 that requires that particular language to be on any complaint form. So that's a statutory requirement. The signature was another issue, but doesn't appear to be a statutory requirement. But so if we address that later, we can do that. But I just wanted to point that out. The documentation, as you're aware, one of the things we weren't capturing as well as we should have been is kind of any complaint that would come in that was resolved, and we have since addressed that. So any complaint that comes in, whether it's resolved by the first line supervisor or gets moved up the chain of command. Regardless of that, it gets, a supervisor completes the supervisory form. And so we track all of those complaints from here on out. And that form is also attached in the packet. Yes, Trustee Stokebrand.
So documentation, at what point do we make these things public? Because it would seem to me that it would be in the best interest of everyone if we could have these things out in public. And I don't mean in terms of, obviously, if someone says I was sexually assaulted by a police officer, we're not going to do that. But if you kept the critical private information private, the badge number, I don't need to know specifically which badge number. I don't need to know what happened to the alleged victim of, or whatever happened, whoever thought they were not treated the way they should be treated. But I would like to see, if I went online, every time someone filed a complaint about the police department, I would like to see a tab. I mean, could we do this? Could we have a tab that said complaints? Here's where you post a complaint. Here's where you see how many complaints the department has had for the year, for the month, like you do crime statistics. And then at the end of the year, without divulging anyone's private information, we can say, oh, well, there were 7 complaints about I was stopped for rolling stop sign, or what do you ever call it, and I don't think it was fair. And this is Officer 9 whatever was it was found to be valid, and so it was, I can't remember the category here, unfounded or whatever, exonerated, or you know what I'm saying? So how could we make this all? It just seems like we need to have more transparency.
And can I before you answer, Chief, just sorry, I wanted to jump in with, I want to pull out a couple themes from what Trustee Stokebrand said. I think first of all, first and foremost, we need to make sure we have a robust online system for which to receive complaints. I think that's kind of that's what everything else is predicated on, even as we move forward and discuss the complaint form. So I think that's kind of a table stakes thing that we need to put in place. Then I think that there is certainly value in making this a more transparent process. We've talked, a lot of groups, there's been a lot of talk about how can we involve the police commission? Is it something where the police commission can receive them? I'm not in favor of having the police commission be an investigatory body, but I think there might be some role to be played there in terms of the police commission receiving summaries of complaints. Certainly I'd be supportive of, kind of what Trustee Stokebrand was talking about, the summary report posted online so we could see it. But I think it all really starts with making sure that we have a robust online form. And then we'll get into it, I'm sure, but I think there's a lot of ways we can improve the current form that's existing there. So I think there's a tech play here. And I also think that there's kind of that transparency play where you involve the police commission, you have summary reports, maybe you have something that goes up through public safety to the board. I think those are all good things to pull out of what Trustee Stokebrand just said.
Yes, if I could just comment on a couple of those. So as you know, we do the monthly reports, and those are online as of today, and they do have a lot of information in there. The only reason that the complaints aren't on there currently is because we're going through this process. So putting those on the monthly report is no problem at all. I think if we want to talk about exactly what's in that or what that details, we can, I think, certainly talk about that further and just make sure that we're following all the appropriate rules that we have to follow. But I see no issue with that. The online reporting, I did check with our current web provider through Tyler, and they're able to make a form right on our current website that would be able to be applicable for people to file a complaint. And that could be used for not only the police, but could be for any village employee or village official. So that could be done through the web provider. What that form and what information is obtained on that form, I think is to be discussed. And I think that's kind of one of those things. Again, we can work through that as well. And then the monthly summary would certainly be on the monthly report. And then we would do a yearly report that would capture those as well. So I think we're as we move through that, I think we'll be able to get to where you're kind of talking about, Trustee Warren.
Okay, great. And this, just to be clear, the purpose of this meeting for both the trustees and the public on the call, this is really to provide feedback as you design the process, right? This is not a vote on every item. This is more of a, what are we thinking this should look like? So this is more of an ideation session.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we talked, I think the goal at the end would be for the village board to adopt a policy
Yep.
on this that everyone is comfortable with. Yeah. Yep.
Brent, sorry.
My question would be on point 10, 10.5 documentation, should we add and publication? That would be one of my suggestions to
Yeah.
consideration in the future. Thank you.
I am taking notes as we go. If you go to the next page, page 4 of the complaint process or the complaint policy, I just want to point out that we added about if the matter it's C sub A, and that's where if the matter is resolved and no further action is required, the supervisor will note the resolution on a complaint form and forward the form to the deputy chief. And so that's to make sure that we capture all of those complaints. So I just wanted to touch on that. The next sections, the administrative investigative procedures, the format, and the dispositions are somewhat laid out in statute. And so how we investigate the complaints are governed by 6213 and some legal matters. So that kind of addresses that. So if there's anything in there that you want to address as we move forward, we can look at that, and we just have to look at it from a legal perspective on whether or not we can make any changes in that area. So that's kind of what's in that midsection there on page 4 and 5. And then page 6, we talk about the completion of the investigations. We talked about completing those in a 90-day time window from the time that we receive the complaint to the time that we end the complaint. So that's a goal that we will strive to do.
Hey, Chief.
Yeah.
One thing, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but it might be nice if on the complaint form itself, I don't recall seeing that language. It might be nice to put in the intro that we expect to complete our review by 90 days, and we'll touch base back with you after that's done. I think that, complainants would like kind of an expectation of kind of the resolution. I think that'll help in terms of at least setting the expectation that their complaint will be handled in a timely manner.
Sure. Yep.
Sorry, while that was top of mind, I wanted to bring it up.
And the other things you could think about too is, like, for instance, maybe, certainly can put on the form, or maybe it's a packet that someone receives, right? And so someone files a complaint, maybe they're handed a packet of information about, which may include the policy and other things, right? So that would give them as much information as they may need to understand how their complaint will be processed. Just a thought, but there's a lot of ways that we could look at doing that.
Right, and one thing I was also thinking, sorry to interrupt, I think that we take the procedures that we're talking through in the complaint form, we make the changes that we want to make, and then we off of that, we drive the changes to the brochure. So we can, that brochure can be something that I think we update based on what we plan to do. So at this point, I don't even think we need to talk about the brochure. That will be conformed to what we do here. So I think, and that'll be helpful in terms of setting expectations and providing information about the process.
Yeah. And, I do want to point this out. It's like when I got here 6 years ago, there was a complaint form, but there wasn't a brochure. There wasn't anything. And so while I understand that the language could be improved, I just want to say that it's better than what we had when I got here. I understand that we can always improve the way of doing things, but I just wanted to point that out because I did the best as far as coming up with the form. So
no, and that wasn't meant to be a shot at the brochure in any way. I was just thinking it's probably best to figure out any changes that we want to make and then change the brochure at the end to make it conform.
Absolutely. No, I didn't take it that way. I just wanted to kind of give us some history on the background of the brochure. So, okay. And then I do want to point out on page, there's some, criminal investigations, some of those things that are technical in nature that are governed by statute and how we do that as far as conducting an administrative investigation concurrent with a criminal investigation, and there's certain rules and procedures that we have to follow there. So that kind of lays that out. Again, that's more legalities, and so if there's any issues there, we'll have to work through those. On page 8, I do want to let you know that, so anytime it's under the on page 8 under the under my responsibilities. So if any officer or employee, actually any sworn employee of the police department is suspended for any reason, the statutes do require me to notify the president of the Board of Commissions on a suspension. Currently, there is no regulation that would require any other notification. However, we're talking about that, so we could certainly implement different types of notifications. But I just want to point out the current policy addresses the state statute.
Kathy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question. I don't see pay anywhere here. So throughout this whole policy for personnel decisions, the person that the complaint is alleged against is paid throughout the process. Is that correct? And is that obligated by, I mean, some of these people won't be covered by union contracts. So, but that's the way that this reads, right? They're paid throughout until they're let go as an employee. Is that, I mean.
Correct. So, there is, you can, if the offense was so severe that the employee would be terminated, then they would not be paid. If the offense is such that it needs to be investigated and the employee could be put on administrative leave, and in which case they would be put on administrative leave with pay, because that is a legal issue prior to termination. So yes, they would be on paid administrative leave pending the investigation.
So is suspended with no pay an option legally? Why would we not have that available to us? I'm just asking. I don't know.
I don't believe it's legally possible, but I would have to have that officially reviewed. So don't quote me on that, but I believe it's a legality issue.
Okay. I would want to be clear on that because that could be important.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm just writing that down, so. Okay, and then on page 9 of the policy, it talks about the post-discipline appeal rights. And that's where the police commission would currently come in place. So if I were to discipline an employee and or terminate an employee, they have the ability to appeal that to the police commission to have a hearing. And then the police commission would determine on whether or not to uphold my decision or change that. And then the other one was just a recommendation about putting in there exactly how long we retain those records. So I just point that out, that it's 20 years per the current ordinance that deals with retention of records. So that is the yes, Trustee Stover.
So I have a question about those records, because there's some movement now about records of specific police department employees. And so as personnel records right now, they're guided by private employee law, right? Or is there a separate law right at this point in Wisconsin that applies to police officers?
I think I'm not aware that it's a specific police officer issue versus just a general employee file issue. But I'm not an attorney, so
like
that one.
Someone in the DPW, or you know what I'm saying?
Same thing as a police officer, I believe.
Okay.
As far as access to those records is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
So that is the current policy that we have. And one of the things that, just for kind of informational purposes, is we have, and if you look at the bottom of all these pages on the policy, you'll see a copyright from Lexipol. So Lexipol is a nationwide organization that has, it started as a, legal mitigation company, and they transformed into policies and procedures. And so they put out the best practices of policies and procedures across the country. And they have attorneys that vet the policy manuals, and we get updates on when legal changes are made and updates to the policy that need to be made. We'll get those notifications and we'll make those updates to be current with law. So I just point that out from the perspective that, when we talk about best practices in general, that's what the manual should be doing. Again, we can certainly modify that as long as it's within the legal parameters. We can modify our policies as much as we want. And so, we'll probably do that with this one as we move through. But I just kind of wanted to give you a basis of where our policy manual comes from. So with that, Trustee Warren, do you want to, I guess, address any specifics in the policy, or would you like to go to the form itself?
I think there's a lot of feedback on the form itself and the process. I'm trying to, yeah, I mean, let's, we've had a high level discussion of the process. I mean, I kind of have feedback on both pieces, but let's try to get to the form and kind of let's get through that, and then we can kind of tack back to, both form and then process, and then anything else we have with respect to process. I'm trying to get through both tonight, so I'm just trying to make sure we move.
Yeah.
And at least get an initial report on both, and maybe we won't finish the discussion on both, but I want to get us to, I want to have the talk on both, and then we can see how far we get.
Sure. So the current complaint form is in your packet as well. And again, I will not emphasize, but I'll just, that form actually was here when I got here. We added the brochure, but the form, I just used the existing form when I arrived here. Again, it's just a general statement. It means nothing other than just for history purposes. So the current complaint form is in your packet. And, there's been a lot of discussion about the form itself. So I guess I just will turn it over to you. And I'll point out that, what is captured in the complaint form is really not as necessary as the time and date of an incident. So what I mean by that is, whether or not we have them, completely fill out the form with name and address, or we just have a name, or we just that, as long as I have some general information about the situation, we can proceed with the investigation. Now, if it's anonymous, then there's, some limits to that. But as we wear body cameras, and if I have a time and date, I should generally be able to figure out kind of what they're talking about. So I think, I know Trustee Stokebrand and I have had some conversations about the form in the past, and, so I think we just need to discuss on what you feel comfortable with on the form and what questions it asks, right? And then I think what we do is we take that form and put it online, and then we also have a paper copy available. So I'll let you go.
Yeah, and I said a couple things, and some of them mix up process and the form itself, but I'll just go to high level and probably miss some stuff, and I'll have more feedback. But obviously online submission is key. I'd also like to see other mechanisms, think through and see other mechanisms by which complaints could be submitted, just to make it as easy as possible. Anonymous complaints, I'm queuing off of what you just said, bringing those up. We want to make sure they're treated equally, and also that people can check back in even if they complain anonymously. So maybe something like a tracking number. Bumping down to kind of the form itself. I'd like to see if there's any way, and maybe this is a little phase 2-y, but any way to provide translations or different the form in Russian or Spanish or both. Increase accessibility to the form for people who may not be able to access it for one reason or another. Perhaps include some wording on the form about immigration status not influencing how a complaint is resolved. I'm okay with removing the signature line within the form. I would mark the complainant information as optional because you can submit a complaint anonymously. So I think we want to star that, flag it or not as optional. And I'd also like to kind of move it down in the form and move the actual complaint process up to emphasize that the most important thing is the actual complaint, not necessarily the complainant's information. Sorry, I have a couple more things. We might want to track race, ethnicity, gender of people who submit complaints if they're comfortable sharing that information with us. I'd also advocate changing work hours to best hours to contact. I think that sounds better. Sorry, I'm trying to see if I have anything else that I wanted to go over right away. Tracking numbers. I mean, I do think we want to discuss kind of going down the line, how we collect data and how we display data and who we share information with. That's probably a bigger conversation than we have time for in the 26 minutes, but that all goes to, tracking any trends, tracking, do we have one person who's been complaining against time and time again for the same thing and seeing those trends out. And then I think that another thing that's come up thematically is providing assistance with this process from non-police personnel. So is there some way to provide assistance kind of outside of the police force itself and walking through the complaint and figuring out the complaint? And, I think it's important. We went through this a little bit in the past to, update the brochure, which I think is great, Chief Nimmer. I think it's great that we have a brochure, update the brochure, say what's going to actually happen and set expectations and follow through on those expectations. So maybe if there was some resource we could figure out to ask questions about the process, that would be good too, in addition to updating that brochure and handing it to people when they submit complaints. I mean, top of mind, those are the things that I'm sure I missed a bunch, and I will probably have more to submit as we go on, but those are the things that I thought about. Now, moving forward in this meeting, obviously I'll go to the trustees for their complaint, for their comments. And then I would like to take some public comment. I know that I spoke with several people and asked them to join us tonight. So I think that I'd really like to hear from people who are on the phone and would like to also have their voices heard in this process. So that's the way I see the rest of this. We have 25 more minutes together. That's the way I see the rest of this playing out. So with that, I will stop talking. Jim, Kathy, anything further to add?
If I could just add, if we could maybe have 10 minutes at the end just to talk about the structure. So I really would like to talk about that as well.
Okay. Kathy.
So in my view, one of the best things we can do is to keep this simple. And so I noticed there's talks about in the personnel complaints, various types of complaint summary form, and we've got the citizen complaint form, and then there's a reference to a formal complaint. I wonder if we just need to make sure that we only refer, like we narrow it down to maybe three different, or, in my personal opinion, you'd have your citizen complaint form and your complaint summary form. And all those will be documented and tracked. And those are the two, everything has to fit in those two categories, just because then you have clarity. No one can say, well, I didn't know, someone called it in and nothing, I just think it would be important to have the two forms. And whether someone calls it in or well, obviously if you email it, but then you get into the Facebook question. So but it seems to me if an officer sees on social media or a CSO sees on social media something that could resemble a complaint, then the CSO would then file a complaint summary, right? So that, you know what I'm saying? So each thing takes a form in the system. So there is a way to track it and nothing falls between the cracks. That would be my concern. And I think I agree with all of the things that you mentioned, Wesley. Trustee Warren, thank you. And thank you, Chief Nimmer.
Yeah, I would just agree with everything that trustees Warren and Stokebrand had to say. Simplicity is important, and also, and everything from how we sequence the information here, as well as the language used. It's really important to emphasize that that this is about getting people's experiences and people's complaints first and foremost, and making clear that we want to hear from citizens about their experiences. So anything that can be seen, and it's encouraging that, so much the better. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I turn over to public comment, and please, if you want to speak, please do the hand raise thing function on Zoom. Just a couple more things that came to mind as I kind of review my materials. I think that in addition to demographic information, we might want to, as opposed to requesting the exact birth date, we might want to provide an age range, just thinking about people's ability to submit anonymously. If I submit my birth date, you kind of lose some of that anonymity. So it might be better to do an age range. Also, and I'm kind of thinking through what this would look like. It might be worthwhile to allow complainants to say what their desired outcome is, or kind of just to kind of gauge what, and again, they're not going to be, it won't necessarily conform to what kind of the laundry list of actions that can be taken is, but it might help to contextualize the gravity of the complaint. So, the desired outcome might be like, I would like the officer to call me and apologize. So, I don't know exactly what that would look like, or, but we can kind of work through it as part of this process. And with that, please, anyone who wants to comment, please feel free to raise your hand. I will open it up for public comment. And Dory, I think you are first on the list.
Thanks, Trustee Warren. And thanks, Chief Nimmer, for all of this. I know we've met, and I appreciate, and we've met with Trustee Warren. I appreciate everyone, everything that you've brought. So I had one question, and Chief Nimmer, you may have referred to this, and I wasn't sure. When you referred to 66.0511, does that have to do, well, can you tell me what that is? It had something to do with policy. Okay.
So it's getting dark in my office. I didn't turn the light on here. The statute says under 66.0511, it says that citizen complaint procedures, it says each person in charge of a law enforcement agency shall report in writing, shall prepare in writing and make available for public scrutiny a specific procedure for processing and resolving complaints by any person regarding the conduct of a law enforcement officer employed by the agency. The writing prepared under this subsection shall include a conspicuous notification of the prohibition and penalty under 94666. So that's
Okay.
what that's the exact statute language, and that refers in that section on both of those. So
Okay, and I'm guessing that then that your comment to that was in response to our request to remove the discouraging language of the filing false report penalty. Is that true? Or is this, does this have something to do with something else?
no, well, I just wanted to point that out because I didn't even realize that. And so when I was looking through the stuff that we talked about, I wanted to specifically bring that up. So.
Okay. Then I think I misunderstood and was thinking that it was all connected. So I guess the one thing that I just wanted to offer in this space is the request from the Shorewood Police Accountability Working Group to remove the discouraging language of the filing false report penalty. And of course, we know that there needs to be somewhere some information, a statement of not to let the complainant know that not to file a false report, though we were feeling that the language was very strong and that maybe it could be worded differently or even put in a different place. There may be some other people on this call who have some specific suggestions for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dory. Yeah, and that might be something that we talk to the That might be something that we consult with the village attorney on. I mean, it's statutory construction. That conspicuous language means that, they clearly want it front and center. But the question becomes, and again, I don't have a photographic memory for what Chief Nimmer's reading in the statute, but maybe there's some flex in terms of what form we put it on. Could we drop it into the brochure? Does it have to be right above the signature line? We can kind of talk over those things as we move through this process. And Chuck, I see your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me? Thanks for taking my questions. Firstly, this said this complaint process comes from Lexipol. Were any other policing organizations' complaint standards checked at all, such as NACOL or the Center for Policing Equity, to see what some other departments are doing for complaint processes? That's for Chief Nimmer.
I have not, no.
So this is only the Lexipol, okay. The second question I have is that this refers to the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. I think that was on page 4. What is that? And is that a legal state statute?
Yes, under 6213.
And what does it mean? What's the
I would have to look at the statute, but it's under 6213.
6213?
Yep.
Okay, and then my last question is, as a member of the Police Commission, on the rules and regulations of the Police Commission, it talks in section 504 about the Police Commission being able to accept the complaints. So in other words, a person wouldn't need to go into the police department, or it wouldn't go directly to the police department. Is that possible for the Police Commission to accept complaints?
Yes, yeah, always has been.
So, so I guess what I'm asking, so you're imagining if this comes online, that the online form will go to Police Commission and to the police department? So I'm a member of the Police Commission. There was a complaint filed in September of last year that the Police Commission didn't ever receive it. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of process. So the Police Commission can accept complaints for sure.
Correct.
So we can build that into this change. There should be no issue with that.
I guess the police commissioner would have to decide what they would like to do.
So if it's in the rules of the Police Commission to do it, the Police Commission, that seems to be the roles and responsibilities of the Police Commission. So something they could do. Great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Trustee Stokebrand, Kathy?
I'm sorry, I know we're supposed to go earlier, but this segues off of Chuck's point. So do we want two parallel, if we do that, if that Police Commission language is read that way, do we want two things, parallel things going on at the same time? That's my question. What are the pluses and minuses of having a complaint investigated by the Police Commission at the same time as it's going through the department?
I mean, I guess my thought would be, and Chief Nimmer, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that the Police Commission has the manpower to actually investigate complaints. I think it's more awareness. And depending on kind of whether you want to do that at an individual complaint level or a complaint summary level and what meter you wanted to do it, if it was a summary, that's the way I would see it. I wouldn't see the Police Commission as an investigatory body. I would see them more as being aware that these complaints exist, which would facilitate them acting within their function. But I mean, I could be wild. That's just my thought process on it.
It sounds like you're thinking very advisory.
Yeah, I don't think they have. I don't think there's the resources to investigate complaints in the police commission. But I do think that it's something where they could see and be aware of complaints and also receive a summary. You know, and again, I'm just brainstorming here. So, look, I think I have. Chuck, if you don't mind, I see you were before Kristen, but Kristen hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to call on Kristen next.
Hi, thanks, Trustee Warren, and hello, everybody. I have, let's see, a comment, a suggestion, and a question. I mean, and my comment is first, thanks for the work on this. Thank you to Trustee Stokebrand for the idea about posting the basics of the complaints on a website so that there's kind of a general public ability to have an eye on what's going on. And then to Trustee Warren for facilitating this and suggestion to focus on the complaint form itself. And to Chief Nimbers for providing a lot of background on this. My suggestion in relation to Trustee.
Sorry, I've had a long day of Zoom meetings and was happy to be listening and not talking, so I apologize for that. You'll be able to hear me a lot better now. Since Trustee Warren brought up many dimensions of accessibility, which I thought was an excellent point, I would want to suggest in relation to that, that if the form is changed to allow or to take entry on race, ethnicity data and gender identity information, that be a free text entry box. Sometimes people will say, oh, let's have it relate to the census, but because over the past 20 to 30 years of the census, they keep changing the categories, and having done work in surveys with census data, I can tell you that many people find the 2010 categories offensive, and the gender categories are too limited. So a free entry box so that people can name their identities in these areas would be best. And then my question is regarding this issue of the role of the police commission and the role of the police commission, which is it really for the police commission to decide what they will see or review? And Trustee Stokebrand, I appreciate your raising this question of, are they going to investigate? I guess I understood it as a review process, that they would see the complaint and then have some kind of say in if they had concerns, or similar to, yeah, a review kind of process, which happens in a lot of different kinds of agencies, right? But I guess I'm wondering, is it really for the police commission to decide that, or is that up to the village board to decide the role of the police commission?
I mean, I think just to jump in, and by the way, Aaron, David, and Chuck, I see you, and I'll certainly take those three comments, and then we'll close public comment. But I think that there's some kind of statutory authority about what the police commission can and can't do, and then I think it's up to, I believe, and I might be able to turn, then the village board kind of would, outside of those parameters, would begin to explore what the police commission could and couldn't do. I think that's correct, but I'll check and make sure that I'm up to speed on that. But I believe that's the correct. I think that's the right way to conceptualize it. So I think I had David. I think I had you next.
Oh, thank you, Wes. Yeah, I mean, another part of the Weiss study had to do with citizen oversight, and I know he mentioned, well, we have the police commission, we have the HRC, we have the village board, and that we don't need another entity to do oversight. But I certainly think, I don't know how there could be citizen oversight without some kind of sharing of information about police complaints. So I mean, I guess my reaction to this policy is it all is still entirely taking place within the police department. So where is the citizen oversight? I don't know if the police commission is the right body, or HRC, or maybe it's the village board, but that is another aspect of the Weiss report that I think was important.
Thank you, David. Aaron, I think you're next.
So I just want to make a couple of points. One is that there are different approaches to civilian oversight depending on the jurisdiction and the issues and the amount of money that's available. But one kind of very like accepted form of civilian oversight is that a body like the police commission would review what happened to complaints. So they would both have information about the complaint. They would not do the investigation for the complaint because they don't have the resources to do it, but they would review the investigation of the complaints. And as I understand it, and having read the rules of the police commission, that is their role. Like, they are being told to do that. And so unless the village board takes that role off of the police commission, I think it is a reasonable expectation by citizens in Shorewood that the police commission will in fact do the job that they were asked to do. And I don't think that under the current rules of the police commission, it is a choice. Neither is it a choice to make this available to them, nor is it a choice of the police commissioners to do it or not do it. And if they don't want to do it, then maybe they shouldn't, maybe they have a different vision of what they want to do on it. But I would like to see people on the police commission that want to perform the rules that the village board has set up with them.
Thank you, Aaron. And now for the last, and by the way, I'm sorry, I'm going quickly in between comments. I'm trying to make sure that we are respectful of time here, but there are a lot of good ideas to be clear, there are a lot of very good ideas that are being brought up, and thank you very much for the comments. Chuck, we will end public comment with you.
So I was trying to answer Trustee Stokebrand and what you said about parallel investigations and parallel complaints, and Aaron answered it very well. It's the review model, which is a very civilian oversight of law enforcement is a very common method of oversight by smaller communities. The other issue that I wanted to point out is that while the HRC can certainly be involved, the police commission does actually have statutory authority related to the police department that does not exist for any other body in the village. So.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate all the comments, and appreciate everyone attending the meeting. And Chief Nimmer, based on the discussion here, do you have what you need to provide kind of general direction going forward on this? And I'm sure we will be discussing this further, but do you at least have what you need at this point in the process?
Yep, I think so. And then if we could talk about the organizational.
Okay, sorry, I got you. I know you wanted 10, I got you 5. So
yeah, I'll go quick. So what you have in your packet is the current structure of the department along with the current staffing. And so if you look at the current staffing, we have 24 sworn officers as of today. And we have been authorized 25 officers for as long as I can remember, as long as we can go back, we've had 25 officers in Shorewood. So we do have one vacancy. The vacancy that we currently have per se is the school resource officer. And so there should be probably some discussion down the road on whether or not we want to look at that position again, or look at a community outreach officer, which I think would be a great addition to the department, but that's for a different day. What I want you to focus on is the upper command staff of the department. As you're aware, we had a deputy chief position. That deputy chief retired last year, right before about March or April of last year. So we have been filling that position with Lieutenant Liebenthal, who's on the phone. So he's in the acting role of that position. And so through discussions with the village manager and the assistant village manager and looking at some of the recommendations, what we're proposing is to eliminate the deputy chief position and have 2 captain positions and 5 sergeants. So currently we have, in theory, 1 deputy chief, no captains, 2 lieutenants, and 4 sergeants. So if you look at that, that's 7 and 7. Our supervisory level would remain the same at 7 and 7. So there's no additional positions or no additional supervisors. I know I got an email from Trustee Stokebrand asking about the budgetary impact of that. While I don't have that today because I wanted just to get the overall sense from everybody today. But I think from a budget impact, I think it will be neutral overall because we're eliminating one position. We're eliminating, a deputy chief position. We have 2 lieutenants, we'll make 2 captains, and then 1 will be a sergeant. But I don't have those budget numbers, so I don't want to speak on that. But Tyler and I will be working on that, and we'll be able to give you that number the next time we meet. And then if you look at the organizational chart itself, you can kind of see how the realignment of positions will really streamline the department and kind of put everybody under a span of control that is manageable. So I'll take any comments from the committee. Thoughts?
So, Trustee Stokebrand?
So who would be second in command? If you have 2 captains underneath you, you would say one is a first captain, one is a second captain? I mean, that would have to be clear, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
And what are sometimes in management, a more horizontal structure is perceived as more positive for the employees versus a more vertical. In law enforcement, I don't know. Can you, is this the better? It looks to me like this is more along the Alexander Weiss model.
Correct. We framed it off of that a little bit. It also, it just aligns everybody a little bit better. So from a police organizational perspective, I think it's aligned better. When we talk about that, because of the span of control and who reports to who, so make sure that everyone is familiar. If you look, the deputy chief currently kind of has his hands in a lot of different things, and we just need to separate some of those duties that will be in both positions.
And so there's obviously a big difference. One captain has 8, one has 13. Why would she get more than the other?
Well, so what's not in there is the actual duties, right? So we have one of the captains will be charged in open records, those types of things. So, so some of that is the captain that would be in charge of the detective bureau would also be in charge of open records and internal investigations and those types of things.
Okay.
So they would have less employees under their command, but they'd have technically some more job responsibilities. And we'll bring back job descriptions to you as well.
Okay, and you see the captain in the middle and the captain on the right, which one would be more your COO would be your second in command, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions, Trustee Stokebrand. That I don't know that I have any kind of supplemental questions. I mean, if this makes sense from an administrative standpoint, it makes the department operate more efficiently. Certainly something I'd be supportive of. The structure, just from an optical standpoint, and maybe sometimes that's the best way to look at it. It looks cleaner than what we're moving to. It just looks like a cleaner structure to work through.
Yeah, and then at some point we'll address the line level and the detectives, and we're talking about some of that stuff later. But I wanted to get the command structure set because we are having, and you should ask one of the lieutenants is retiring, so this is really beneficial from that perspective. And I think our power just went out here at the PD, but so anyway, I will. If there's no other questions, I'll let, I know Mark Emanuelson is eager to get going, so.
So you have everything you need? I
do.
Okay. All right, well then, if nothing else from Jim or Kathy, pausing there for a moment, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the Public Safety Committee.
So moved.
I'll second.
Sorry, seconded, yes.
And I would like to say, we'll start at 7:05, please, our next one.
So all those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the comments. And we will see you in 3 minutes.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
Are you taking over?
I always think so.
Well, I know, but I'm talking about taking over the like letting people in and stuff? Do you know how to do it?
Well, somebody I saw made me host, so.
I saw that. Yeah, I don't know who did that, but because I don't plan on sticking around. So do you know what you're doing?
Sure, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've got the participant list up.
Okay, good.
I think I'll get queued if somebody wants to get in. Is that right, Peter?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Then I'll let them in.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night.
Hello, Director Emmanuelson.
Hi, how are you this evening?
Okay, is it raining in Port Washington?
It is raining in Port Washington, yes. So I had one rather robust bolt of lightning about 10 minutes ago, but otherwise just pretty steady rain.
Well, we do need it.
Absolutely.
We just ended the public safety and I took a 5-minute break.
Yeah, I caught the end of that, so just,
Okay.
Take your time. Whenever
Okay,
you resume, then
I think we're good here. It's 7:06. I'll call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. And Mark, perhaps you can help me. Do we need a vote to accept the Q1 finance report, or do we just
no, it's a staff
enjoy
report.
it? Okay.
Yeah. So every quarter, we put together the staff report for a budget to actual, kind of a update of how things are going. Traditionally, the first quarter financial report is a little open-ended as far as a lot of the types of detail you'll get in like the third quarter and fourth quarter financial report. And that's largely because, with 1 quarter of data and a lot of the major spending categories are not linear. So it's just hard to get a real trajectory on a lot of the types of things, revenue assumptions, expenditure assumptions, things like that. So what I start out is saying that we think everything by and large is going as projected, according to budget. You know, there's going to be some variances that will show up either to uneven distribution of revenues or expenditures. Again, not everything has posted that applies towards the first quarter. I make a real effort to post as much as we can. And I sprinkled notes throughout the report that kind of let you know where there's trends that you should be aware of and other details. We've also provided, you know, like about 5 pages of high-level summary information at the front of the report for quick review and context. But really, to get into the nuts and bolts of questions, I always recommend going to the department sections that drive that summary information. So I will make a brief comment that there is one notable exception at this point for the budget report, and that is we do not expect court fines to meet budget this year. There has been a shift in the number of citations being written, which will likely produce about a 50% decline in budgeted revenue compared to where we were in September of last year. And we don't really see that changing. So try to disclose things as we know them. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to cover that. That's one of the things staff and department heads will always look at, is ways as a whole to make sure we stay in budgetary compliance to the best of our ability. This is just one line item, but it's a relatively significant line item. It's going to start out with about a $60,000 shortfall at information that we have available to us at the moment. So with that, I'm happy to take questions as anybody might have on other items and try to help answer those and give you more information.
Thank you, Director Emanuelson. If no one else has one, I was just wondering, do we have any idea about money from the federal government related to COVID? Is there anything that we should know?
I don't think I've heard of any new money related to COVID. There's the, I think they call it the American Rescue Plan that's been recently enacted that we will be expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 million over 2 years. Waiting for a lot of administrative rules to be clarified, as well as the state has to clarify exactly what portion of the total funds the state gets that the village is eligible for. The state hasn't actually released that information. There's some affiliated organizations who've estimated that. I think their estimates are going to be reasonably good. It may turn out to be 1.1 million, maybe 1.3. I think they're probably within a 10% margin of error on that. So as soon as we know definitively what those numbers are, we'll obviously share that with the board. And but I'm really looking for the federal guidance on what's allowable to expend those funds on, to make sure that we follow that accordingly.
And so it's conceivable that if you can't meet the parameters, you may not get to use your whole piece of the pie.
Well, I'm pretty comfortable that the parameters will be broad enough this time through to be able to find a way to take advantage of the funds provided for assistance to the village. Last year, the parameters were very restrictive. I expect this year's parameters to be a broader in nature, and we'll have to have a couple of discussions for sure on where the board feels the best way to utilize that funding would be for the community.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, Trustee Warren?
Sorry, I was just trying to figure out where the hand raise thing was. Is this easier or is that easy? So Mark, what I'm hearing from you is essentially that in this budget report, the only watch item is those court fines. Everything else is tracking to where you expected it to be, or certainly within kind of a margin that you're comfortable with. Would that be a fair characterization of what we're looking at here?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any trend that you see? I guess I understand that everything is kind of within where we expect it now. Is there anything that you see as a potential watch point for the next quarter where something besides court fines might be concerning, over, under?
Well, as you might recall, last year, the village board made some pretty significant changes in municipal parking policy, as well as the rates that want to be charged for the community. Right now, those metrics look within a reasonable realm of what we had anticipated in total. But we're talking about the first 3 months of a new program. Extremely hard to, put a nut on that, but nothing that I would consider to be warning signs, no.
Anything else, Trustee Warren?
That's it for me.
Okay, I would just say kudos to you, Mark, because it looks to me like for someone who was flying blind, you came pretty good with the parking estimates.
You make there's a couple things that were a little unexpected, but again, in aggregate, I think we're going to be right in the general zone of where we thought we might be.
Okay, I did have a question and something that looked a little concerning. Of course, it's snow removal. Page 166, I noticed we're at 110% of our snow. Am I right?
That sounds correct.
And maybe this happens all the time because we live in Wisconsin, but so we've only gotten through half of our snow year, right?
No, I would characterize it as getting through probably 85% of our snow year.
Okay, it's always worse after January because we go calendar, right? So
yeah, we do a calendar year. So the amount of activity typical, and this is where again, you're providing services and they've got to be provided, and there's some things you're just at the mercy of Mother Nature or other facts. Typically, December is a pretty modest month for snow removal. Not a lot of, again, as soon as I say that, we'll have one of these years like whatever 1982 when we had most of our snow in December, and if that hits back to back, yeah, it's a challenge. But again, just conceptually speaking, one of the reasons the village maintains the reserves policy that they do is to be able to be flexible and adaptable to unforeseen conditions. But as a general trend, December is a pretty modest portion of our snow removal budget.
I feel like every time we repeat that, we get another snowstorm in December.
Yeah,
I hope you're right on this one.
okay, I did have another question then about our debt stabilization on 175. We clearly cut that by 30%. And if you can just refresh my memory on that, that's
what page? What report?
175. I was looking for
not the packet, the report.
Let's see. I'm in the packet. I'm sorry.
Well, each page is numbered.
Okay, hang on here. I'm scrolling. Let's see, 2021 first quarter budget report, debt service fund 300.
What page number is it?
Our pages don't appear to be numbered, actually. Like I'm trying to find it for you too.
Sorry.
We actually don't have numbers on the pages.
Okay, well, you're in the debt service fund. I can.
Yeah, it's 309,049,100.
All right, I'll jump to that. And Kathy, just for your perspective, I think Trustee Arndorfer also has some comments when you're.
Oh, okay.
With us.
Go ahead. Well,
This will just take me a second to find the appropriate page, and I just want to make sure that we're both looking at the same numbers. So you are looking at what number?
debt service fund 300, and it's the last item under revenues.
Okay. And what was your observation?
So you refresh my memory, we cut this by 30%. Because that was sort of a plan that they had used to stabilize the budget with the debt. And so we're right on line with that, obviously. And that's going to be one of our critical decisions for 2022 is what to do with that debt stabilization number.
Right, that's a fixed number for budgetary purposes. I just haven't recorded the transaction yet. And the board did revise their budgetary policy last year and put our debt service payments back on a glide path of 5% per year increase until we intersect our actual debt service payments. And as a result of that, we did not need as many funds as we utilized in 2020 to hold our debt service at a 0% increase. So yeah, that's a good observation. That's something that we'll be monitoring, and that number is going to come up front and center in the long range financial plan. I already know what that number is, and then of course we're going to start out with our baseline, right? You know, the 5% glide path, and then come budget time, the board will have a discussion if they're going to maintain that or choose a different course of action.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Arndorfer? Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. You asked it regarding snow removal.
Okay. Then I guess, Mark, I'm sorry, and I've got my page numbers, and I'm sorry.
Give me an account number, I'll find it.
Okay, let me go to it was a TID increment for TID 1.
Yes.
What on my page, it's 181. I'll be right with you.
Oh, I've got it. I've got these numbers memorized, so
I'm sure.
Tell me what you're looking at, and I'll find it.
I think I was looking at the oh, now I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. So the increment on that 2.5. I think I was looking. What I really wanted to ask about was the next page, the developer subsidies for TID 3.
All right.
$500,000.
That's correct.
Obviously, that's a big jump from 19 and 20. And so my question is that just the way the development agreement was written?
In part, the driver of that is actually the assessed value as the project moved from construction to partial completion to full completion, partial occupancy, and now it's at full occupancy, full completion. So the village entered an agreement to pledge the increment that particular property generates towards the financing of the project, which was effectively the TID contribution. So that is going to be very close to the full value number of that. You might trend slightly up or down for the next number of years until we close that TID district.
Okay, thank you. Let's see how much we've got 10 minutes left. I did wonder, did we have a special line item for the project that we bonded for at 4480 North Lake? It was a sewer project, and I just wonder if we had any final numbers on that, or is it categorized separately, or?
Well, that project came up as an emergency project relative to the 2021 budget. It was not in the sewer utilities original budget, but we did issue bond proceeds for that. I have not received the final invoices for that project as of this point, but I expect that to come in fairly close to what we had approved in the bonding.
When will we see the final invoices for that project, roughly?
I'll let you know the day after I get them. Typically, there takes some time to process through that. I think they are just wrapping up the construction phases, so 30 to 45 days for me is reasonable. Sometimes it takes 60 to 90 days for their engineers and their field personnel to get coordinated, and it's got to go through our engineers and our review, and then they submit it. So I will make a point when that is completed to bring that to your attention, if nothing else, on a Friday update.
Thank you. And I think they are just doing the top landscaping on that. So, and they probably had to wait for the weather for that. So I did have another question about, and this could just be my ignorance. Page 163 to me of the packet, state transportation aids as a positive, a revenue. And so is that something that goes for Capital Drive, for the highways that we have that we use towards? I guess I was surprised to see it. It must be for road, right? Road repairs is two state highways.
Is this in the capital budget or the general? Fund?
No, it's general fund revenues and expenditures, DPW. It's a 100.
Okay.
It's a top item. It's about $750,000.
Yes. The village gets a total amount of state transportation aid. But that is one of the revenues that is split in the general fund and in the capital fund to support usually DPW related equipment purchases. Just as a way, again, part of the reasons we earn those aids is for maintenance of highways and maintenance of roads effort. That's just the state formula. So when DPW equipment is purchased for that purpose, that's kind of one of the juggling acts that we do in the budget cycle, is how much of that's going to be in the capital fund, how much of that's going to be in the general fund. And it's usually what drives that is what's left over goes to the general fund. You know, what we support in the capital budget for state aids is defined. So because it's for a specific cost. Once it's in the public works budget, it's a general revenue from budgetary perspective.
And so that number, when do they let us know, like for 2022, is that a pretty stable number?
I would say by and large, it's reasonably stable. I normally do not know until budget wrap up. I believe there's some pending legislation to try to get that out a little earlier to communities. I'll have to do some research on that, but I track the 6-year trend of the village's expenditures that qualify for that aid based on our state report filings. And we're fairly stable in that. You know, the thing that will impact that for our community is if the cost of a big project performed 5 years ago drops off and we didn't do any work in the current year, that puts our average down. But our averages at this point are pretty steady. There may be some slight drop offs as we move into southeast sewer areas. A little less road work than we've done historically, but we are still doing significant road work. So again, if you look in both places, they total up to about the same number. I don't have my worksheets with me to tell you exactly what that number is, but it's something we do monitor and can reasonably rely upon being stable.
Okay, and then I guess something that I'm not sure you would know, is that different than the state transportation aid that we get through the traffic grants for the police department?
Yeah, those are all separate.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything for Director Emmanuelson tonight?
Nothing for me.
Okay, all
Well,
right.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Seconded.
All right, moved by Trustee Warren, seconded by Trustee Arndorfer. Thank you for all in favor, raise your hand. Thank you.
Thank you. See you in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Hey.